I got the instrument panel all cleaned up. I took it down and cleaned it up with Scotch-Brite pad on a die grinder, polished it up and stuff, made sure all the burrs were off every place, and washed it down with lacquer thinner. Then I got some paint prep and prepped it with that, hung it up out there, and then I wiped it down with a tack cloth, and then I went ahead and coated it with powder coat. I coated it on the inside, on the back side, with some corrosion-resistant primer. And then I wiped that all off on the edges and stuff, and on the front, which bled through, and then I painted the front with wrinkle black. We'll see how that turns out. Well, there's the instrument panel painted. Coated the back side of it with some corrosion resistant primer, sprayed it on first, and then I sprayed the wrinkle black. I don't know if you can see that it's a wrinkle. Yeah, it shows up on there. Shows wrinkle black on the face of it. I made a little bit of a mistake on spraying that, because the powder coat, when you spray it, it goes on everything. Even though I sprayed it from the back first, the corrosion resistant primer bled through these openings and stuff and kind of got a thin coat of it on the face of it. And I tried to wipe it off. I did wipe most of it off with a rag, but I can see kind of the white marks on here where probably didn't get all of it off. So I should have went over it with a rag with Prepsol on it or something to try to get more of that bleed over primer off of there. But if you don't look too close, it doesn't look too bad. Actually, it looks pretty darn good. So that's the way it's going to look for the next however long it is until somebody else builds another one. Got all the instruments installed in the instrument panel. Guess that's why they call it an instrument panel. The way I laid it out is I've got all my electronic stuff over here on the right side as much as possible. The radios, of course, over here, Hobbs meter, the turn coordinator, ammeter, oil pressure gauge, and oil temperature gauge. Everything that has positive electricity going to it I've got sitting over here on this side to try to keep them as far away from the magnetic compass as possible. There's a magnetic compass over here on the far side. Here's the instrument panel now. Got all the flight instruments in, got the intercom set in here. I've been working on the switches and the circuit breakers, and I've got those all in and lined up now. A little bit of a change from what the other instrument panel was. The starter's up here, and that's where it was on the other instrument panel for the other airframe. This is going to be the master switch here, and this will be the mags here. They're on just a slightly different plane than the rest of them, so that way there's no confusion when you start getting in here and running down a line of switches, turning them on or off or anything. The mag switches are going to be in a little bit different line. So the engine control switches are all going to be here, master, mags, starter right here. And then I've got all my circuit breakers down here lined up. I've added a couple of circuits. I've got one for the ELT, and I put a circuit breaker in for the marine radio. And I moved the aux fuel pump switch over here. It's in line with the rest of these switches, but it's over where it's out of line. And I took out the landing taxi switch and put a switch in for each light so I can run them independently instead of having them both on at the same time. So this is what I've been doing today, getting these switches and circuit breakers installed. And I'm making up these bus bars. I've got a bus bar here going. This will be where the battery hookup is, and the alternator will hook up here. So this supplies power to, whether it's the starter, turn coordinator, and engine instruments. Have a jumper, a 10 gauge jumper wire going from this bus bar up to this bus bar, which will energize. This is the switch for the master avionics switch, and with beacon, nav light, and landing lights, landing and taxi light, and then the fuel pump switch. And then the avionics switch jumpers over here to this bus bar, which supplies power to the ELT, VHF interface, intercom, the comm radio, and the marine radio. So that's what I've been doing today. I made up these, I had a piece of copper sheet, and I made up these bus bars. Got them installed, had to hunt around for some screws and stuff to fit, and some of the stuff out of the other when I took it out of the other airframe was kind of corroded up and the screws were boogered up. So anyway, we've got them to fit, and of course These screws in these circuit breakers fit fine through the bus bar and into the circuit breaker, but when you add one more thing to them, they're not quite long enough, so we had to hunt screws up to find that it'll fit. They had some in here that were longer, some number 6 screws, but they wind up going all the way through the terminal here and going down into the body of the circuit breaker and then pushing the terminal up in the air and putting pressure on the body of the circuit breaker. So I didn't like that, so I found a shorter screw and mixed and matched and got things to fit there. So I've got wire hooked up here for the starter switch. I had it hooked up, and then I realized that we've got to manipulate it around this bar that runs across there for the mount, and so I took it back off, and we'll put it on after we get the instrument panel set up in the airframe. So anyway, I think I'm ready to put it in the airframe now.